Hello, everyone. This is a bit unconventional to present to you via video today, but unfortunately I was unable to attend in person. But I'm very excited to have this opportunity where I can still share some of the work that we've been doing over the past decade now to better understand cat elimination behavior and how tracking it provides a window into what's going on with our cat's health and emotional well-being. I hope that you'll see how this ties in well with what Dr. Westrup has shared regarding feline lower urinary tract diseases, and also what Dr. Lappin will share regarding feline urinary disease and how it relates to feline relinquishment. Before I get started, I do want to disclose that I am an employee of Nestle Purina, where the specific research projects that I will describe today were carried out. So why do we care so much about cat elimination behavior? Well, cats are quickly becoming the most popular house pet in much of the world. Despite their popularity, it is inevitable that problem behaviors will occasionally arise in these households that threaten to weaken that bond between cats and their human caretakers. In fact, the most common behavioral reason cited for relinquishing cats to shelters is inappropriate elimination. It's been estimated that around 10% of cats exhibit elimination behavior problems at some point in their life. And if this statistic holds true, then we're talking about millions of cats that are affected worldwide. Inappropriate elimination can be very frustrating for pet owners. It's difficult to manage and it can actually damage the cat owner bond, which leads to potential relinquishment when people just become exasperated with the situation. Once in a shelter, cats that are labeled with behavioral issues, such as inappropriate elimination, can be challenging to adopt. And in regions of the world, such as North America, where euthanasia is a practice at animal shelters, cats with behavioral issues can be amongst the first to be euthanized when space is limited and very difficult decisions must be made. All in all, a better understanding of the elimination behavior in cats allows for the design and implementation of elimination experiences that promote optimal well-being. Inappropriate elimination can often refer to two different problem behaviors, spraying and toileting out of the box. If not medical in origin, toiling out of the box is attributed to a few different causes, including inter-cat issues, such as a cat guarding the litter box from another, where the recommendation would usually be to increase the number of litter boxes, or due to stress or changes in the household, such as moving to a new home or arrival of a new pet or a family member, where the recommendation would often be to use something like Feel Away for stress reduction. Or these can all be signs of a problem with the quality of the litter box. If you do some digging in the literature or consult Dr. Google online, then there's actually a wealth of resources with suggestions to reduce the incidence of inappropriate elimination. You'll find that most of these are prescriptive in nature and based on conventional wisdom. Although in most cases, experts would agree that the recommendations given in these articles may result in a reduction of inappropriate elimination, many of the recommendations they give are not really linked to actual randomized control studies. In fact, there's been remarkably little scientific examination of inappropriate elimination itself. Spraying has received the bulk of attention, with most of these studies focusing on the efficacy of various treatments on the reduction of this behavior. There's also a few studies which identify factors which could put a cat at risk for exhibiting the behavior. Toileting out of the box has received significantly less examination, but most of the work around this focuses on means to make the litter box more appealing for cats, such as changing the litter substrate or the location of the litter box or the size of the litter box. Despite their probable importance, until recently, little was known about cat elimination behaviors. Sung and colleagues developed a basic ethogram, which included things like covering, digging, pawing, or sniffing, and looked for the relationship between these macro behaviors and cats with or without elimination behavior problems. Later, Cottam and Dodman presented a list of 7 micro behaviors that they classified as dissatisfied litter box behaviors, like scratching at the side of the box or resting a paw on the side of the box or on the litter while eliminating. Spooner developed a detailed ethogram of feline urinary behavior. However, this lacked fine detail for some specific behaviors where whether the cat was actually scratching like in the litter or on the side of the box. Those details were left out, as well as not really including behaviors around defecation. So there was definitely room for improvement in understanding really what happens in the litter box and what this means for cat well-being. Within the existing literature, there was really little effort made to distinguish positive from negative litter boxes experiences. So we set out to expand upon these existing ethograms that I just described to create an ethogram capturing a range of behaviors expressed in two extremes of litter box environments. But the goal was not to investigate preferences between the two environments, but really just to identify the different types of behaviors that we would see in contrasting environments with cats eliminating. In this regard, the behavioral information gained here could be employed as a useful tool in subsequent assessment of litter box preferences in a wider range of environments, or to assess the efficacy of clinical interventions. So we set up a design where we had two different litter box environments that we could compare, an enriched environment and a clinic-like environment. The enriched environment was specifically designed to provide a positive elimination experience by including the preferred characteristics identified within the scientific literature as being preferential for cats. For example, large space, moisture absorbing fine-grained litter, odor coverage, and the good ability to conceal eliminations. Characteristics for the clinic-like environment were selected because they were counter to these preferred characteristics. For example, a small space with no moisture absorbency, low odor coverage, and no ability to conceal eliminations. While observation of elimination behavior in an outdoor naturalistic setting was outside the scope of this present work that I'm describing, every attempt was made to consider the outdoor features in the design for the enriched space. For example, the cats had access to an entire large open room and a large sandbox size litter box filled with sand-like substrate. While it's important to consider that different behaviors or different frequencies or durations of behavior might be observed in a more natural setting, the environments presented within our design represented two extremes in elimination environments. For the majority of pet cats in home, the features of the elimination environment that they experience would fall somewhere between these two extremes. In our study, cats resided in each environment for 5 days, where they were videotaped for 24 hours a day. For each cat, 1 day in each environment where the most urination and defecation events occurred was video coded using an extensive ethogram of 39 different behaviors that we had identified to occur during elimination events by cats. Overall, if we consider everything at a very high level, cats had similar patterns of elimination events in both environments, with similar peaks and at similar times of day and similar patterns overall. Also, interestingly, there was very few out-of-box eliminations, even in the clinic-like environment. Of particular note is the frequency of urination events that was much higher for the enriched environment than in the clinic-like environment. So it seemed that cats were actually holding their eliminations in the clinic-like environment. However, we identified many differences too. Elimination events in the clinic-like environment lasted significantly longer than in the enriched environment. The cats spent more time in their pre, during, and post-elimination segments. For urination specifically, the average time for urinating was 19 seconds in the enriched environment and 51 seconds in the clinic-like environment. This is what we like to refer to as a porta potty effect. So it's something akin to us humans if you're at a concert or an event and you really have to go to the bathroom, but you hold it as long as possible because the only option there is a porta potty. In the cat world, just as in the human world, this has the potential to result in urinary tract issues if urine is being held for too long. Also, the only environment where we saw out-of-box eliminations was in the clinic-like environment, but again, this occurred very, very rarely, so cats were actually making a big effort to eliminate inside the box. Animals continually experience what we call reward cycles as they pass through appetitive, consumatory, and post-consumatory phases during their daily activities, things like eating or playing or problem solving, and this holds true in the elimination event as well. So disruption in any part of the cycle by blocking or not providing the resources necessary for an animal to carry out its motivated behavior can potentially lead to frustration or other negative affective states. So in this case, for the cats, we would have the pre-elimination behavior where they're finding a place to eliminate, the during where they're actually eliminating in the litter box, and the post where they're covering up or finishing out that sequence in the cycle. In the enriched environment, cats readily entered and exited the litter box before and after every elimination. In contrast, in the clinic-like environment, cats were more hesitant to enter the box. They were actually waffling of whether to go in or out. And then they were hesitating to eliminate once they were in the box. Cats would waffle in and out of the litter box. It was more common for them to keep one paw on the outer edge of the box while eliminating. And this is in agreement with previous work in the literature, which described that when cats were dissatisfied with their litter box, they would show these kinds of behaviors. The most pronounced difference in behavior between the two environments was really in that post-elimination phase, though. Post-elimination phases were significantly longer in the clinic-like environment. One of the most striking behavioral differences was the incessant pawing at all surfaces around the litter box following an elimination event. On average, cats spent in the clinic-like environment nearly 2 minutes performing their behavior, compared to about 21 seconds in the enriched environment. And this really plays out in home as well, where we hear pet owners often complaining of their cats doing box banging behavior inside the litter box or other such things where they're spending a lot of time in there to complete an elimination event. Also of note, in the clinic-like environment, cats would repeatedly go back and sniff their eliminations. It appeared as though cats were caught in this behavioral sequence loop, returning to the box, sniffing, pawing at other substrates as they were unable to complete their full cycle, unable to cover their elimination at the end. This perseveration of behavior provides grounds for speculation that the cats were actually quite frustrated by the clinic-like environment. And it was difficult for them to overcome their motivation to try to complete the elimination sequence that they were motivated to perform. In the enriched environment, cats spent more time sniffing the litter, and some were actually observed to taste the litter, which was something that was unexpected until we observed it going on in the study. Overall, they showed a more simple sequence of behavior, though. They were in and out relatively quickly. They had a very normal elimination duration and seemed quite satisfied with the environment. In the clinic-like environment, cats showed more behaviors indicative of frustration, such as inappropriate digging, false starts, waffling in and out, more time sniffing the elimination as opposed to the litter itself in the enriched environment. They would contort their bodies or balance on the edge of the box while they were eliminating. Cats showed these behaviors indicative of frustration as if they were not able to complete that behavioral sequence that was just described. Another big difference was that cats eliminated less often in the clinic-like environment. And when they did so, elimination took quite a bit longer. So it's really that porta potty effect. Okay. So what we learned overall is that cat elimination behavior is actually quite complex, much more complex than would have been indicated by initial ethograms that were found in the literature. And in fact, brief elimination sequences may be indicative of a more positive litter box experience. Despite popular perception, cats actually went to great lengths to try to eliminate inside the litter box. They weren't readily going outside of the litter box, even if they were frustrated with it. An out-of-box elimination alone, therefore, might not provide sufficient indication of whether a litter box experience is actually acceptable for cats. Behavior can actually tell us a lot about what a cat likes about the environment and the experience that they're actually having there. So what about multi-cat households? We really just described what goes on for a cat as they're eliminating, but multi-cat households are actually very common. And as an example, about 52% of the households in the US are multi-cat households. If cats are averse to sharing litter boxes, then these statistics suggest that there could be millions of cats that are impacted in the US alone. Many owners assume that cats may not like to use a litter box that another cat has used, then they assume that it's necessary to try to neutralize or eliminate all odors from a litter box to make it more appealing for the next cat. But in fact, there's very little that is actually known about how previous litter box use really affects subsequent box use for cats. So we really wanted to investigate this. The most common recommendation for reducing inappropriate elimination is frequent litter box cleaning. And it's reasonable to assume that frequent removal of waste is a key part of encouraging proper litter box use. However, it's likely that there are other environmental factors which contribute to out-of-box elimination. And this could especially hold true in multi-cat households. Considering the link between out-of-box elimination and the relinquishment of cats to shelter, there's a notable lack of research investigating litter box appeal in multi-cat households. So we set out to really try to investigate this. It is common for feline behaviorists to recommend that people with multi-cat households provide an N-of-1 litter box placed throughout the house. But it's unclear whether this suggestion is intended to merely accommodate the increased amount of eliminated materials, or if it implies that cats really don't like to share boxes. In an in-depth study to better understand how previous litter box use can affect the appeal and how the identity of the previous user can impact that, we looked at this in detail. So here we tried to investigate whether the previous user really had an impact on the cat's litter box use, looking at whether it was a familiar cat that had previously used it or the cat themselves. We also looked at the type of previous use, so whether it was urine or feces or a combination of both. And then we also looked at attributes of the previous use, so whether the odor was impacting it or the physical obstruction in the litter box. So first we looked at the identity of the previous user and how this would impact the cat's preference for the box. So we used boxes that contained both urine and feces. And first we compared a box that was used by the cat themselves to a clean box. And as you might imagine, cats really did prefer the clean box. And you'll see that as a trend throughout, is that cats really do like a clean box. But in this case, we were just comparing to a box that they had used themselves. So then we looked, okay, what would happen if we compared a cat's use of a litter box that had been used by a familiar cat to a clean box? And we found, again, cats preferred the clean box. In the third comparison, we then compared a box that was used by the cat themselves to a box that was used by a familiar cat to see what the cats might prefer. And here we found actually that there was no preference at all. So the cats didn't mind using a box that they had used themselves previously or a box that had been used by a familiar cat. We then set out to really look at what attributes of this previous litter box use might be driving litter box preference. So we looking at just odor alone. So in this case, we actually took urine and we put very small droplets of it around the litter box so that it would smell of urine. Or in the case of feces, we actually had a fecal slurry that we liquefied and took very small drops of that to drop around, just to have the odor alone and no physical obstructions in the box. So then we compared the odor of urine to a box where we had done the same number of droplets, but just of water with no scent, to see what cats preferred. And here, actually, very interestingly, we found that the cats had no preference. They didn't mind the smell of urine. And this was a mix of urine of both themselves and other familiar cats. So just urine in general was not a deterrent for the cats. They showed no preference between that and a clean box where only water had been dropped. We then compared the odor of feces alone to a clean box, which again had just water droplets with no odor, to see what cats would prefer. And here we found, again, no preference at all. So even though the odor of feces was present in the box, the cat showed no preference between that and a clean box, which only had the odor of water. So then we compared a combination. What if the smell had both the urine and the feces, and compared that to a box where it was just water alone? And we found again that there was no preference here. Cats really didn't show a difference in their litter box use between a box that smelled of urine and feces versus a box that smelled clean and fresh. So then we compared urine to feces to see what cats might prefer in their elimination experience. And here again, we found no preference. So all in all, it seems that odor wasn't a culprit in driving preference for litter box for cats. So then we wanted to look at the obstruction. So the actual clumps for clumping litter or the presence of feces in a box and how this might impact cat preference for litter boxes. So first we compared clumps. In this case, they were artificial clumps where we had taken water to create the clump. So there was no odor here. It was only the physical presence of a clump. We compared this to a clean box. And what we found was that cats preferred the clean box. So again, it's coming up that cats really do enjoy that clean box. We then compared the presence of feces in a litter box to a clean box. Here again, we did not want the odor of feces, so we actually made faux feces out of gelatin logs that were rolled in litter, so they appeared to be feces in the box, but had absolutely no odor to the cat. Compared this to a clean box. And what did we find? Cats really did prefer that clean box. That trend held true again. So then we compared the combination. What if a cat had the physical obstruction of a urine clump or several urine clumps and fecal logs in the litter box, and compared that to a clean box? Again, we found that cats preferred that clean box, so that preference was really holding tight. Lastly, we compared what if we had the physical obstruction of urine clumps, again with no odor, versus the physical obstruction of a fecal event in the litter box, again with no odor. So this is where it gets a bit interesting. Cats actually preferred the box where there was the physical obstruction of feces alone, but not any urine clumps. So again, quite complex here, but what we learned is that despite popular perception, odor is really not the culprit, and that previous use of the litter box has no impact on the preference for the cat, whether it was used by themselves or used by a familiar cat. All in all, cats definitely prefer a clean litter box, so this holds true still, even in this design where we had many permutations. And that preference for a clean box increases as the amount of obstructions increase in a box. So the more blockage that's there, the less likely that the cat is to use it. And so the preference for a clean box is driven up. All in all, elimination behavior is very complex, and the litter environment really does have an impact on what's going on with the cats. The cat's behavior itself is really a better indicator than whether they're going out of the box, because as we found from our studies, the cats will actually stretch themselves or go to great lengths to use the litter box. Cats really aren't averse to sharing litter boxes, so this is a good news for all of our multi-cat households. But litter box and maintenance is very important. So getting those obstructions out of the litter box is what will drive compliance and litter box use by the cats. So odor is not as big of a problem, but those physical obstructions are, so scooping is very important. So we know that fluctuations in feline elimination behavior go beyond just indicating emotional well-being or cat social dynamics in a multi-cat household or their preference for litter boxes, but can actually reflect changes in physical health as well. And even latent or early signs of many common health problems in cats can manifest as changes in their elimination behavior. Disorders resulting from altered elimination patterns are encountered frequently in feline practice. And you've already heard about some of those in this session, and we'll hear about more as the speakers continue. Elimination behavior can be altered by many different physical conditions as well as emotional conditions of cats. It's well understood that identifying renal, urinary, or digestive issues and disorders in cats often requires quantification of clinical signs to establish the diagnosis and monitor therapeutic outcomes. A significant hurdle for veterinarians is having access to information about fluctuations in cats' elimination behavior, as they're typically only seeing a cat annually for a well-checked visit or after clinical signs have reached the point to raise owner concern. And even then, they only have eyes on the cat for that short duration of the clinic visit. Thus, for many common feline disease states, tools to track elimination behavior of cats could be instrumental in providing the very early detection of shifts in these elimination patterns, saving critical time towards diagnosis. As we all know, cats are often good at masking their symptoms, and many people are not in tune with noticing these subtle signs. If we take something like renal disease as an example, the earliest clinical signs noticed by pet owners are not regularly identified until the function of approximately 2/3 of the nephrons has been impaired, so late stage 2 or early stage 3, making diagnosis ahead of significant kidney damage very, very difficult. Early indication of these shifts would be a game changer. If we could identify these very early and actually have a chance to have that proactive treatment of cats in relation to kidney disease, this could be amazing, and in relation to a lot of other disease states as well. In practice, veterinarians have had to rely on cat owner direct observation and interpretation and quantification of changes in elimination behavior to establish a diagnosis, and then to monitor therapeutic outcomes. So this can be problematic given that pet owners would typically have limited direct observation of their cat's elimination events. Not only is it common for cat owners to place litter boxes in secluded areas of their house or use covered boxes, but it's also common for cats to show secretive or nocturnal voiding habits. Many people report that they never even really see their cat go in the litter box. They only know that they've used it because when they scoop it out, they find elimination events there. So even if litter boxes are well placed in the cat's households, and cats use them when their owners happen to be nearby, which is a lot of ifs, then pet owners may still have difficulty in keeping tabs on multiple cats and multiple boxes in the home. If they are following that N of 1 rule and they have multiple cats and there's boxes placed in different areas, it becomes very difficult to try to keep tabs on that and to remember which cat used which box and how often they're going. Even if they are that super cat owner and they do pay very, very close attention to their cat's elimination habits, may be difficult for them to actually track those over time and really understand how that's changing for their cats. So given the hurdles in tracking cat elimination behavior, there's been a handful of studies to test out tools for facilitating this task. Delaney and colleagues investigated the potential for the use of a video recording system to track frequency of urinations for cats in an effort to help diagnose urinary disorders. The authors found that a number of urinations detected via video analysis was significantly higher compared with the caregiver observations. In fact, a handful of caregivers reported that they had never even observed their cats in the litter box. So we can glean from this that the cat caregivers commonly underestimate urination frequency for their cats, and video recording systems to track urination behavior could be helpful in the diagnosis and treatment of cats with urinary issues. However, setting up a camera system in and around the litter box, reviewing those videos that are produced, that's quite cumbersome, and some pet owners might not really want cameras in their house. In another study, Jones and colleagues explored means to track defecation frequency and fecal scores for cats that were both apparently healthy and then also cats that had been diagnosed with CKD, as well as to really try to assess owner awareness of elimination frequency in general. So cat owners were asked to complete an initial survey regarding their cat's health status and typical elimination behavior. And they were asked to estimate the typical frequencies of urinations and defecations and typical fecal scores for their cats. The same cat owners then were asked to scoop their litter boxes every day for 7 days straight to report the number of eliminations and the fecal score for each defecation event. Interestingly, the authors found that for owners of healthy cats, the predicted frequency based on their initial survey of elimination differed significantly from the actual observed frequency of eliminations. However, for cats with CKD, their owners seem to have a better awareness of their cat's elimination patterns, likely because they're more vigilant about looking for indications of their cat's health status. So these findings provide evidence that while tracking of elimination behavior by cat owners is difficult, cat owners may pay more close attention to their cat's elimination behavior if they have reason for concern, but those that don't have reason for concern of their health really aren't paying attention to their cat's elimination behavior. So there's room for improvement here in how we can help pet owners better track this. So knowing that a more sophisticated digital tool could be an asset for the diagnosis and management of a large suite of behavioral or disease states in cats, we set out to design a digital tool that could automatically track the elimination patterns of cats and track those changes over time. We started by developing a platform equipped with sensors that could slip seamlessly under a cat's existing litter box without requiring changes in the cat's litter box setup. This was critical for our data collection, as we know that changes in cats' litter box environments can be a source of stress for cats. And we wanted to ensure that the data collection tool had a very low profile so that we weren't posing any barrier for litter box entry for even senior cats with more limited mobility. So keeping the cat's existing litter box super low profile so that the cat's elimination behavior could just go on as usual, and hopefully they wouldn't even notice a platform under the litter box. We deployed these data collection platforms together with video cameras to use as a source of truth data to record all of the interactions that the cats had with the litter box, as well as any interactions that their caretakers had with the litter box. And we deployed these into a wide variety of settings, including both single and multi-cat scenarios. We then collected data from over 300,000 litter box events, and we cross-referenced that data with the sensor data and the video recordings for each event to create a very robust data set that was then used to develop algorithms to detect and track specific interactions within the litter box. The key to impactful, insightful artificial intelligence is provisioning of high quality data to fuel the training of models during AI development. To be able to train a device to accurately detect the behavior of a cat requires precise data matching with specific behaviors of a cat to the corresponding sensor data streaming from the device. So we collected the sensor data streaming directly from a platform under the litter box in time series with that video footage for each event. Videos were then analyzed by a team of trained video labelers to identify the context of the recorded event. Here's an example. This cat is Cartman, and you see here the setup. You can barely see the platform that's underneath this litter box, and he's entering the litter box, sniffing, digging, doing all this pre-elimination behavior. You'll see the corresponding data coming from the sensors underneath the litter box. So as he is moving about the litter box, we're able to label his very specific behaviors and match that to the sensor data streaming from the device. So you'll see here, he's digging, he's finding the appropriate spot where he decides to eliminate. He does quite a bit of pre-behavior here, pre-elimination behavior as part of his cycle. So you see those weight shifts as he's moving around the litter box to identify that very specific spot where he would like to eliminate. And you'll see in a moment, he'll strike a posture for elimination pose. There we go. And then this is actually a defecation event. So you'll see a flat line here in the sensors while he's actually making the defecation. But then at the end, you'll see as he sort of flexes his hips, that pattern is detected there on the sensor data. There you go. So you see that happening. So then he'll finish up this event with his post-elimination behavior, at which point he will exit the box. So this labeled truth data synchronized with the raw sensor data really enables us to develop that artificial intelligence to automatically translate the sensor data into insights about the associated behavior with the cat. So this was an example of a defecation event. I will now show you an example of a urination event, so you can just see the wide variety and the difference between cats. A key here is that we really are identifying individual cats based on the differences in the behavior. So while you see Cartman here had quite a complex behavior pattern for his event, for the next cat, Patrick, you'll see a much more simple set of behaviors for his urination event. So here we go with Patrick. You'll see him approaching the box. He's sniffing from the outside of the box at the litter. Here with this different shaped litter box, you can more easily see the platform underneath the box. Patrick enters. He's sniffing around to see his event. You can already tell from the sensor data here in the graph that his behavioral patterns are much less complex than the Cartman in the video before. He's actually quite stealthy about just entering the box. This will be a urination event. So you see there, he's just made the urination event. He's now sniffing it, and he's now covering it, only his behavior pattern is to not cover the actual elimination itself, but he actually paws around the elimination. You see he continues to sniff and then cover more, and he's out. Easy peasy, just like that. So with this large data set, we're able to then use machine learning techniques to develop algorithms to identify individual cats, even from a multi-cat household. Cat identification combines information on each individual cat's weight and their behavioral tendencies, like their typical movement patterns within the litter box, their preferred elimination spot, or typical time of day when they eliminate, to create that unique paw print for that cat. With our models, we're able to then track each cat's frequency of visits to the litter box, classify those visits as a non-elimination event or as an elimination event. And then within each elimination visit, we're able to determine if it's a urination or a defecation, just based on the sensor data streaming from the devices. We've also developed the capability to track the duration of these events and the time of day patterns for specific litter box interactions, or even track cat preference patterns and behavior between multiple boxes within a household if they're equipped with a monitor. So for multi-cat households, if this monitor is placed under multiple boxes, we're able to pool the data together and track the patterns of the cats across different boxes. The system also measures cat weights for each visit, when the cat fully enters the litter box. So we can track weight fluctuations over time. And given the impacts that the litter box maintenance can have on cat satisfaction with the litter box, as we described in the previous studies I described earlier in this talk, we know that this is very important. So we've developed models to track scooping and other human interactions with the litter box, such as topping off litter or complete full maintenance of the litter box. So providing this detailed data regarding cat litter box use is very important. However, translating that data into meaningful insights is even more powerful. As already described, pet owners might not be great at tracking their pet's elimination behavior, but also not at interpreting changes in that. So the ability to provide this tool to them can go a long way to help them provide that proactive care for their cat. So together with a team of behaviorists, veterinarians, and nutritionists, we built out a system of expert decision tree logic through which all of these predictions for the models that I just described their run through to then translate that into insights to be communicated to cat caretakers. Many cat owners really lack that animal behavior knowledge to associate litter box use with health or welfare states for their cats. So this feature in a litter box monitoring system is really critical. So we're pulling together all of this insights to build out that logic, which really then can take that data that's measurable and translate that into data that is meaningful to actually be that good partner in tracking our cat's behavior and health. The expert logic takes into account the profile of the cat, including the age, the sex, reproductive status, and the body condition to be able to monitor fluctuations in weight and elimination behavior and provide notifications when a cat's weight or frequency of elimination crosses very specific thresholds. In this way, a threshold for a young ideal weight cat would differ from those for a geriatric underweight cat. So the logic is built out to really take into account the different cat profile in order to push out recommendations or alerts when behavior is fluctuating to a point that could indicate that something was going on either from a behavioral or a health perspective. So the result of this effort is really a sophisticated system that automatically tracks weight and elimination behavior of individual cats and translates that data into meaningful insights around cat behavior and health. It consists of artificial intelligence paired with expert decision tree logic that provide a window into the changes over time, empowering cat owners with the knowledge to better understand their cat and provide the best care possible. All in all, the main takeaway here is that there's a lot of value in understanding what goes on inside the litter box. Despite being something that people often hide away, the litter box is actually an amazing tool, serving as a window into what is going on with our cat's health and emotional well-being. With technology, we can turn an ordinary litter box into a smart tool to learn each cat's unique litter box pattern and identify subtle but meaningful changes in those over time. For apparently healthy cats, data for litter box use patterns can be used to track fluctuations related to emotional well-being or satisfaction with the litter box environment, especially combined with data around litter box maintenance events by the caretaker. By understanding the litter box from the cat's perspective, we can provide guidance then on litter box setup and maintenance to promote optimal litter box satisfaction and therefore promote litter box compliance and reduce out-of-box elimination. Even more critical is the role that the litter box plays in health and really can play as a tool in monitoring cat health. Subtle changes in elimination patterns can serve as very early indicators of change in the health state. So when a cat presents with possible signs for renal, urinary, endocrine, or digestive diseases, veterinarians are encouraged to get information about the duration and the progression of clinical signs, whether an episode was the patient's first or reoccurrence, the interval between episodes, the presence of systemic signs like weight loss. The smart litter box monitor that we've described here is really a system that can provide all of this very valuable data. So it really shows that tracking what goes on inside the litter box with a digital tool can move us from what is a more reactive to a more proactive approach for health and well-being of cats. Thank you.